We're now officially a quarter of the way through 2023, and I'm back to being on pace to beat 100 games for the fourth consecutive year. Here are my final thoughts on every game I beat in March of 2023 and the rankings based on how happy they made me. I enjoy indie titles like this that are more about the story than anything else. I have enjoyed those in the past. Some I've enjoyed quite a lot. But the farther away you get from traditional gameplay mechanics that you stray, the farther away you get from traditional gameplay mechanics, the more I tend to struggle, because the more it feels like I might as well just be watching it. I get the impression from this game that I would have enjoyed it just as much just watching a YouTube video of it as I would playing it, because all playing it really involved was clicking at different places on the screen until you found out what would move the game along, what would move the movie along. More accurately. So when it gets to that, there were some parts that I enjoyed, that I thought were interesting and poignant, and I really did like the music. But as a video game, I struggle with an experience like this that really plays very fast and loose with the idea of what a video game is. I'm glad that games like this exist. I'm glad that there are games that are expanding the boundaries of what video games can be. But from a pure enjoyment level, it's not going to rank very high. You know, I like boss fights, you know. I like combat. I like video game stuff. I like gaining levels. I didn't get any of that in this. And I wasn't expecting any, to be clear. But I think there are, in my opinion, there are other games that do a much better job of telling a beautiful story outside of the conventions of a traditional game, like something like Before Your Eyes. I thought that was a beautiful game that tells a very deep and tragic and wonderful story. This seems to try to be telling a deep and tragic, wonderful story, but it just didn't seem like it had all the pieces there for me. So, you know, I mean, thank you for trying. Thank you for trying. This is not going to be something that is going to be one of my favorite games, though. Not even when it comes to this type of game. This is definitely one of those games that is timeless in the way that it plays. It's about as fun to play now as it was 30 years ago, and you know, that's probably why it's still as popular as it is, and it's got 10, 15 games now, or however many, whatever it is. But I will say this: it does have a few issues for me. It's like it wants you to go fast, but then it punishes you for doing that because you end up falling off of a cliff or running into an enemy or something. And so I feel like there's a bit of a conflicting messages that the game is sending me. Like, be careful, but go fast, but be careful. And also the water level wasn't that fun, but I mean, I guess that's par for the course for games in the 90s. And when it drops frames at certain points, like, that's a technical issue that really bugs me, especially when there's a time limit, when I'm running out of oxygen. So that was kind of annoying. But all in all, like, I still think this is a great game. Is it going to rank as high as the original Super Mario, which I played earlier this month? I don't think so. I think I had more fun playing the original Mario than I did this. This is probably something that's got a lot more replay value because I didn't do any of the chaos rings, special levels, and it's like every level you can go through like a dozen different paths. It seems like to get it to see everything in every level, and I didn't do any of that. So this game probably has some more replay value than the first game. But as someone that only plays a game once and then never plays it again, that doesn't really matter to me. It was a very good game. It hasn't really aged today, but it doesn't feel as pristine to me as the original Mario game. It doesn't seem as perfect, It's got a couple of little issues that bugged me a little bit. But it was still fun, still great. Still glad I played it. I'm looking forward to playing the second one, just like I'm looking forward to playing the second Mario game. So I did enjoy it overall for sure. Considering when it came out, it's still actually kind of fun. It's still actually kind of fun. I enjoyed playing it at times. But it definitely suffers from that Nintendo problem. That Nintendo RPG problem where it's like, you're not going to be able to get through this unless you have dozens and dozens of hours on your hands or a walkthrough. Preferably from Nintendo Power. So it definitely is like one of those games. It reminds me a little bit of Castlevania 2. Maybe not so obtuse, but there's no way I would have been able to get through this game without a walkthrough. Even beyond what was in the original manual, which I did read eventually, about halfway through the game. But you know what? It's going to rank higher than a lot of... It's not going to rank as high as... I did not enjoy this game as much as a lot of other modern games, to be honest. Is this going to rank as high as Breath of the Wild? No. It wishes. Not even close. Not even close to close. But it is going to rank higher than a lot of Nintendo games. Probably. Is it going to rank higher than Ninja Gaiden? Probably. Is it going to rank higher than some of the other older Altered Beast and some of those games? Yeah, probably, because it's still the RPG elements and the exploration are fun, and upgrading your character and all that stuff, that's fun to do when you find better defense or you get a better sword. That kind of thing is what gets me going in RPGs, and this has that, and it was the first game that had it, or one of them. So that's impressive, especially understanding when this came out. This must have blown children's minds when it came out. I was only 2 when this came out, so I don't remember it. But man, it must have really been something for a lot of people when this came out. I bet it blew people's minds. I bet people enjoyed spending dozens of hours trying to figure out how to beat this game. That's just not me. Especially not now. But yeah, I'd say overall, the main question is, does the experience hold up today? And I'd say largely the answer is yes. Yeah. As long as you have the internet. That's my opinion. When I started this game, I thought it was going to be added to a long list of older first-person shooters that I've started and just couldn't stomach finishing. Games like Black, and there have been a bunch of others that I really tried to and I just couldn't because they were dated and they made me motion sick, and the combat just wasn't snappy enough based on what I was used to with these newer Call of Duty games. And I'm gonna turn that down just a little bit. And I ended up being wrong. I almost gave up on it, but it ended up being pretty enjoyable for how old it is. The combat was actually pretty decent. It wasn't, the greatest first-person shooting experience I've ever had, not even close. But considering how dated it is, it was tolerable at worst and downright enjoyable at times, especially toward the end when it became a little bit more of a challenge. But so I'm really interested to see how the later Far Cry games build on this, because I've heard they're very different. So I'm really glad that I played this one to just get a foundation of like, okay, these are the origins of Far Cry. Now, where's the series going to go from here? Yeah, like I said, it didn't like blow my mind or anything, but it was all right. It was okay, for very impressive for its age. This is a 20-year-old game pretty much at this point. So I was impressed. I was impressed with how good it was. If it hadn't been good, I would not have made it through it. I would have given up on it. But yeah, I don't have a ton to say on this one. It was okay. I only played it so that I could have a baseline for the later ones. That's the only reason I played it. And that's probably going to be the most valuable thing about it, for me. I will tell you this, as the very first game I ever played, this is definitely something that I remember blowing my mind, thinking that it looked and felt amazing. Just the idea that I could control what was happening on a television screen with my controller at 5 years old was really, really amazing. And so there is, even though I've never beaten this game, there is some nostalgia tied to it. And I gotta say, man, it's got some jank, of course, but all in all, it holds up way better than most Nintendo games that I've played do. It's still a solid 2D platformer, even by today's standards. You know what it really reminds me of more than anything else when it comes to recent games? Stuff like Jump King, or stuff where it's just very basic 2D platforming, but it's difficult. If I were playing, if I were playing this in 1987, it would have blown my mind. If I were playing I think I did a couple of times pick this game up, like at a friend's house or something in the 90s, it would have still felt great. 2000s great, 2010s great, 2023, Super Mario Brothers still holds up. It's a good game. I have no idea where I'm going to rank a game like this. But I respect it. It's a good game. It's a fun, solid game, and it still holds up. And I look forward to playing the other ones. This game had a lot of things that worked really well. I thought the combat was pretty fun, actually. Some of the quests were repetitive, and a lot of the enemies were pretty spongy, but the combat was fun. The moves were interesting and varied. I thought the story was great. I thought the acting was really good. There was a lot of good stuff about this game, but you could tell the way the campaign is played that it's designed for some other kind of gamer that's not me. The best parts of this game are locked behind the credits, and I never see anything past the credits. Just the way that it was built was just not great. All the loot grindy stuff was okay. It actually was a little boring because, I don't know, it just felt like it was just numbers, They didn't make it feel like it was real, In Diablo, when you get a better weapon, you can see it, you can feel it, you can see how it changes the combat. When you got a different piece of gear in this game, it was like, oh, cool, a 14 instead of an 11. It's just not, it doesn't have the same weight, So that the loot grind hurt. I mean, I don't know. This game actually reminds me a lot of Anthem. It's a lot of potential that is never going to be realized because nobody ends up giving a crap about this game. Nobody ended up caring about this game enough to stick with it, or at least not many people, not enough people. I don't think it's going to rank very high. I was really hoping that it would, because there are some live service games that I really like. I'm a huge fan of the Division games. And, so just because some things like uses this live service model doesn't necessarily mean that I'm not going to like it. I like rarity-based loot. I like random loot grindy games. So I was hoping I would like this game despite what I'd heard, but unfortunately it turned out that a lot of the criticism I've heard has turned out to be true. It's just, the loot grind is pointless. It's just math. That's just all it is, It doesn't change the way your character looks. It doesn't change the way they play. It doesn't change really anything. It's just numbers. So that wasn't engaging at all. But again, I did. It's if they had made it a single player. I'm sad that I'm about to say this, because I actually am not a fan of this narrative. But in this particular case, if they had made this a single player story, just campaigns, or maybe a 4-player co-op type experience like a Borderlands 2 or something, it would have been a lot better. But because they tried to shoehorn in all this live service crap, I think it really suffered. And that's not exactly a hot take. I did not think I was going to feel that way, and it turns out that I was wrong. I'm going to play Guardians of the Galaxy soon. Hopefully that'll be better. The original Silent Hill has aged very poorly in some areas. The visuals are rough. The gameplay, the control scheme is even worse. But the horror is still very much intact. It is a scary game, and it is fun to play, fun to explore, fun to try to move forward. The puzzles were fun. It still holds together fairly well as a horror experience, and that is not true for most PS1 games. I consider most PS1 games to be virtually unplayable, but this is a very notable exception, despite having terrible controls and terrible graphics by today's standards. Even if a game has a great story or something, I would have trouble getting through it if the graphics and the gameplay are as bad as this game. But Silent Hill is able to carry itself forward on how interesting the exploration is, how fun and scary everything is, and specifically the sound design in this game. Understanding that they created the sound design for this game with little more, barely having passed the MIDI era of audio. This game has awesome sound design. It is really amazing. So with that package all together, this is still a great game. I enjoyed it immensely. Man, I gotta tell you, while the visuals of this game are obviously dated and are very clearly no longer fresh and clean, the gameplay is still quite fresh and quite clean. It really plays like a game from 2016 or 2015 instead of 2005. It really plays very well. The gameplay hasn't really aged much. First of all, it's an excellent game. This is a great game. It's really fun. The story is really interesting and cool. The cutscenes are a lot of fun. It's very well voiced. Surprisingly well voiced for when it came out. It's obviously very influential. It's clear that games like later games like Souls-likes and a lot of other action, like hack and slash games, got their inspiration from this. It's I realize this isn't exactly the first game to do this. Like, I believe the original Devil May Cry came out before this, but this is kind of a different kind of a game than that. Really fun, really cool, really engaging. The gameplay really is still fresh. And let me just tell you how impressed I am personally by that, because I see the PS1, PS2 era as kind of a dark age for video games. Not that there weren't good games that came out during that time, but almost all of the games that came out during that, from 95 to 2006, are almost unplayable by today's standards, and this is a very notable exception. Like, this game played great, and it is the original game. It's HD or whatever, but it plays, as far as my understanding is that it plays exactly like the original. So I am very impressed by this game. It is going to rank high. I think about other games that I've played in the past, like Dante's Inferno and the Devil May Cry series games and stuff like that, and it makes me think that, you know, while Devil May Cry did come out first, I believe, technically, the later games definitely borrowed some stuff from this, and obviously Dante's Inferno did. Really, really good game. It's going to rank high. It really plays very like a modern game. That's really impressive to me. And I actually cared about the story. I almost never care about the story in video games. The story was great. You know, I'm very curious to know what's going to happen between this and then up to the later games. I don't know much about the story, but I know he's like older or whatever, so I'm curious to know how all that's going to play out. Like, he has a kid and stuff, you know, so I'm curious to know how all that's going to play out, given the story in this one. Kratos will return. Oh, we know. Anyway, it was a great game. Loved it. This game took a long time to get going. It was a very slow burn, but some of the best horror movies do that, as long as they can deliver effectively once we get there, right? And I think this game did a great job of delivering when it came to story and suspense and a sense of agency. A lot of stuff that was missing in the first 30-40% of the game really kicked on into high gear in the second half, and it was really, really rewarding. I would say that I don't think it was that scary, but it did put me on edge, because I knew that my decisions had weight, and I knew that I couldn't fail QTEs or people were going to die. And, you know, I was crushed at the end because things did not go my way and things fell apart really quickly for me. But that just goes to show that the game was effective in what it was trying to do, because if the game hadn't really been able to pull that off effectively, I wouldn't have cared. So while it wasn't as scary to me as Until Dawn or Little Hope, I think was probably scarier too. I would put it on par scary-wise with like House of Ashes, because I didn't think that one was quite as scary. While I didn't think it was the scariest Supermassive game, I do think it was still a lot of fun, very enjoyable, very effective, and very, heart-wrenching, really. I mean, there were some characters that I didn't like at all that lived, and there were some characters that died because of me, because I failed to take care of them, that I really liked. I really ended up liking most of the characters. I hated most of them at first, but they started to grow on me, and by the end, I really was invested in trying to make sure that these characters stayed safe. And when I blew it, it really hurt. So I think that speaks to the effectiveness of the game. I think that was really good. I don't know that I've ever been that invested in the characters in any other Dark Pictures game. Now, does that mean it's the best Dark Pictures game? I'm not sure. I'll have to think about it. But I thoroughly enjoyed it. And if you like those choose your own adventure kinds of games and you're not and you're not afraid of a little bit of scares, you should play this. It's not that scary, but it is, it's quite gory, but it's not that scary. So, as long as you're not averse to horror in general and some gore, and you like those kinds of choose your own adventure type games like this, or Detroit Become Human, or Until Dawn, or As Dusk Falls, I recommend this game because it was a lot of fun. But give it some time, because it takes some time to get there. Overall, I think this game was better than the first Resident Evil Revelations in every way. I feel like Resident Evil Revelations was decent. It was tolerable. I think it was subpar as a Resident Evil entry. This game reminded me a lot more of the newer Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake entries, the way that they were formatted, and I really liked that. I think this game is an overlooked gem among the Resident Evil games. I didn't even know this game existed until a couple of years ago. And I think it holds its own with some of the newer Resident Evil games. Village, Resident Evil 2 remake. I'm not sure it's quite as good as those, but I think the quality is of that level. I think the quality is at that level. So I really enjoyed it. Great action and great balance of action and horror, which only the best Resident Evils can really say. And it's a nice little palette like wetter for the, is that a word? Is that a turn of phrase? For Resident Evil 4 remake when it comes out here in a few weeks. I'm very excited about that. So now I'm going to go on to Resident Evil 6. But I really liked it. I thought it was well done. And it plays like a modern Resident Evil game. If you like Resident Evil 2 and 3 remake, you should play this game. I'm not saying it's as good. I might say it's about as good as Resident Evil 3 remake. I'll have to think about it. But I think it's at that level. That's actually a really good question. I don't know if I'll rank this higher than Resident Evil 3 remake or not. It's not as good as Resident Evil 2 remake, but I feel like it's at that level. It's very, very good. It's very good. And I didn't feel that way about the first Revelations game. So, yeah, if you've overlooked this one, you should play it if you're a Resident Evil fan. I do not understand the hatred that some people have for this game. I thought it was pretty great from start to finish. There were a couple of exceptions in a couple of parts of a couple of the campaigns, but 90% of the game was super fun all the way through. I do understand a couple of things. It was pretty much all action and no horror, although I thought some of Leon's campaign definitely had some good horror stuff in it, but it definitely was heavier on the action side. But so was Resident Evil 4, and everyone loves that game. This really seems to me like more Resident Evil 4, even more over the top. I mean, it plays a lot like Resident Evil 4. The story is bonkers, but that's Resident Evil 4, or that's Resident Evil in general. The inventory management wasn't as big of a deal. So, there was that. But these are nitpicks. These are nitpicks. I mean, the game overall was super fun. It had some good scary parts. The action was great. The way that all the campaigns weaved together was really clever, I thought. I thought it was a great game. A great action game. I would say this is better than Resident Evil 5 for sure. I think Resident Evil 5 made some changes to the formula that were not that great. And the fact that this is a game that is clearly designed to be a co-op experience, that's really cool. And I would recommend this as a co-op game to play with someone else. But as a single player, it was still fine. It was still just as good for me. So I don't understand the criticism of this game, really. I guess by the time this game came out, people were sick of just more of the same, but that's what it is. It's more, in my opinion, it seems like more Resident Evil 4. which is fucking awesome. What's wrong with that? I just thought it was really great. I just thought it was really great. And it did have some, especially in Leon's campaign, it had some good horror stuff in it. But yeah, it was mostly action. But again, so was Resident Evil 4. I don't see what the issue is. I guess people were just sick. They just wanted something different. And, you know, I'm glad, ultimately, that people had the reaction to this game that they did, because it's the reason that we had Resident Evil 7, which I think is even better. But you take this on its own merits. If you've skipped Resident Evil like I did as a Resident Evil fan because you heard that it was not that good a game, pick it up, play it again. It's not a bad game. It's a very, very good game. This is actually going to rank really high. I want to say I like this more than Resident Evil Revelations 2 and Code Veronica, which is saying something, because I really liked both of those games a lot. But like I said, this reminded me of the way that it played a lot of Resident Evil 4, and yeah, bring it. I'll have as much of that as it wants they can want to give me. So I thought this game was incredible. Again, not perfect, but pretty excellent. Pretty excellent. And I'm glad that I played through all of the campaigns. That's not something I would do with every game. Let me start off by saying that this is an awesome game. It is an excellent game. It is beyond great. I would say it is an excellent game. But I would not call it a masterpiece. And the only reason I would say that is it is impossible not to compare this to the Nioh games, since it's the same developer and it's the same genre of game. And it's very, very similar to the Nioh games, so I have to compare it to the Nioh games, and it is not as good as either of the Nioh games. The boss fights were about as good as the Nioh games, but the gear and combat wasn't as fun. The loot grind wasn't as fun. The level design, I don't think, was on par. Was up to the same standard as the Nioh games. The enemy design was fine, but it wasn't like wowing, like wow factor like Nioh games was. The Nioh games were. It was way easier. It was way easier than the Nioh games, especially on the back half. It did that thing that Souls-likes do sometimes, where you crest this wave and then suddenly the game gets a lot easier. Dark Souls games are famous for that. This game did that too. The front half was pretty rough. And there were some bosses, including the final boss, that were rough. They were tough, but nothing like some of the bosses in the Nioh games, and certainly nothing like some of the less levels in the Nioh games. There were some really, really hard levels in the Nioh games. There were a couple that were tough in this game, but again, I died 257 times in this game. Even on the lower, in Nioh 2, I died 569 times. So, I mean, big drop off in difficulty, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, but when you're talking about a Souls-like, you've got to factor that in. Like, it's supposed to be hard. This was not an easy game. It was a difficult game, but it was not as challenging as the Nioh games. And I have to hold that against the Nioh games. It was also shorter than the Nioh games. I'm okay with that, but some people might have a problem with that. But all that being said, it's still better than a lot of Souls-likes that I've played. Team Ninja knows how to make a good Souls-like, and this is a very good Souls-like. I would say it's better than any of your like bargain bin Souls-likes that are coming out these days. Way better. And since it was on Game Pass, I mean, it was absolutely worth the money. So, very, very good game. Great game. Not a masterpiece. 8.5 out of 10. The Nioh games are dimes, but this is an 8.5 out of 10, I would say. Maybe 9. And no, not a 9. Not a 9. 8.5. But very good, very enjoyable. Very enjoyable, very good game. Very interested to see what they'll do next. I'm just curious because it feels like they took some steps back in this game. Like there was some quality of life stuff that just they took back away. Like it wasn't in Nioh, and then it was in Nioh 2, and then now it's not in this one. Like just some of the checkpoint stuff, some of the UI stuff. level design wise, that kind of thing. But that's a nitpick. Overall, very, very, very good game. Very good game. Just not as good as Neo. Wow, what an amazing game. Resident Evil 4 Remake has managed to do the impossible in that it somehow has recaptured the magical feeling that I had at 21 years old playing the original game, which was my favorite game of all time for years after I played it. It still has an argument after all these years. It has managed to recapture. It made me feel like I was playing maybe the best game ever again for the first time. I've never played a remake that has managed to do that. I've never played a remake that was able to do that. That's really special, and I am so glad that Capcom has the reverence for these entries and this IP to lovingly craft a remake like this in-house rather than outsourcing it to some third party to make a few bucks, like, I don't know, Konami is doing with Silent Hill right now. I mean, we'll see how those games are, but they're not taking care of it themselves, you know? They're just letting other people do it. Like, Capcom would never do that, it doesn't seem like. They care too much about making great single-player experiences like this. Is this... Now, the Resident Evil 4 original, when it came out, was easily my favorite game of all time, and it never was topped. It wasn't topped for years and years after that. But that was in 2005. Is this my favorite game of all time? No, I don't think so. Is it in the top 5? Maybe. Probably. The only reason that I wouldn't call it my favorite is that my standards for a great video game are a lot higher than they were in 2005. And obviously this is a better version of that game, in my opinion. I don't think I would put this at the very, very top. But when it comes to just like a video game-ass video game, this is as good as it gets. This is as good as it gets. I don't know exactly where I'm going to rank this yet, but I know I like it more than Resident Evil 7. How much was this game? $60? I would have paid that 3 times over to have this experience. I mean, it really is. Magical is really not too strong a word. It was so perfectly done. It really made me feel like I was playing it for the first time. What a great game. That's it for the month of March, and it brings us to a total of 29 games beaten so far in 2023. Have you ever beaten any of these games? And if so, did you feel differently about them than I did? Let me know about it in the comments, and be sure to subscribe for more gaming videos. Thanks for watching!